learners. In this video, we are going to discuss the prose Nelson Mandela Long Walk to Freedom. This lesson is divided into three parts. Introduction, in which we will discuss the key concepts from the prose. About the author, in which I'll tell you some important biographical details from Mandela's life. And about the prose, where we will briefly go over the main points about this text. The second part will be reading based, where we'll read the text line by line. I will explain it along with the discussion of difficult words and their meanings. In the third part, called analysis and conclusion, we will analyze the major themes from the text. Let's get started with the introduction of the text. The first key concept that we need to understand is racism. But before we start, let's see what we mean by the term race. Race refers to the division of human beings into different groups based on their physical features such as skin color, type of hair, eye shape, etc. J.F. Blumenbach, who was a German doctor, he classified human species into 5 categories in 1779 based on their skull shape. He called these 5 categories 5 races. Basically, he conducted some experiments measuring the size of the skull, of the cranium of human beings, and he divided human beings into 5 major races. The first one was Caucasian or white race. The second one was Mongolian or yellow race. The third was Malayan or brown race. Indians come under this race. Ethiopian or black race. American or red race. Since he was a doctor, he just said that these are the 5 different categories. He did not say that any one of these races was better than the other race. He just said that there's a diversity in human beings. There are different kind of human beings, and these are the 5 kinds of human beings. So he did not say that any race is better than the others. Now let's come back to the term racism. Racism means prejudice, bias, or discrimination against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. Racism is a non-scientific theory. I just told you that while classifying human beings into different races, he used a scientific theory, right? He conducted experiments because he was a doctor. But racism, it's just an ideology. It's not a scientific theory. A person who supports racism is called a racist. So a racist person is somebody who thinks that whichever race they belong to is better than the other races. The next key concept is apartheid. It literally means separate. This is a word from Arkansas, which is sort of a dialect in South Africa. It means separate. Apartheid was a political and social system in South Africa under which people were divided on the basis of race and were forced to live separately. They were not allowed to mingle or marry each other. This system discriminated against the black people, which made up about 73% of the total population, by snatching their rights to own property, to vote, or to move freely in their own country. So apartheid was a social political system which was legalized in a way, and the government legalized it, saying that black people, because they are from an inferior race and white people are from a superior race, therefore black people should not go in areas where whites live, right? You can see how racism got these two things are connected, these two ideas are connected. You can see how racism got manifested into a social political system called apartheid. As the government passed laws in South Africa making apartheid legal through various acts and laws, discrimination against the black people became legalized. So people openly started to discriminate against black people. Now let me introduce the author to you. Nelson Mandela, he was born on 18th July 1918 and he died at the age of 95 in 2013. Nelson Mandela is considered the father of modern South Africa. He received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993 for peacefully destroying the apartheid regime, which had focused on racial segregation. Segregation means separation, and laying the foundation for democracy. So before he came into power as the president of South Africa, there was a system which was put into place. I just told you that apartheid was a social political system which was common. He worked towards ending it and he brought democracy in his own country. Nelson Mandela was the president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. He was the first black president of South Africa, elected democratically, and one of South Africa's first black lawyers. Because black people obviously did not have the rights to go to school, to study, to pursue things that white people could. So he was one of the very few black people who actually became famous lawyers of his time. In the 1950s, he was elected leader of the youth wing of the African National Congress, the ANC Liberation Movement. So, since his college time rather, he was involved in these sort of political activities. He wanted to take part in the freedom struggle. He wanted his country to be free. He wanted everybody to get equal rights, equal voting rights, and otherwise equal rights in his country. Mandela was jailed from 1962 to 1990 for treason and conspiracy against the government. He was sentenced to life in prison for 27 years. So he spent approximately 27 years of his life in prison. He came out in 1990 and he became the president in 1994 in a democratic election. Now, let me tell you something about the prose. This prose is a collection of excerpts taken from Nelson Mandela's autobiography titled Long Walk to Freedom, which was first published in 1994. So, Nelson Mandela wrote a book about his own life details and he titled it Long Walk to Freedom. This was published in 1994. So, this text of yours consists of various excerpts. Excerpts means parts taken from this autobiography. It's a collection of these excerpts. It includes the description of the inauguration ceremony, the first time he became the president, the inauguration ceremony, an excerpt from his speech as elected president of South Africa in 1994. It also contains the description of his journey as a freedom fighter and a heartfelt tribute to the other freedom fighters of his time. So that's it about the prose. That's the introduction. Let's start reading the text. 10th May dawned bright and clear. So Nelson Mandela got inaugurated as the president of South Africa on 10th May 1994. And he talks about this day and how he was surrounded by various people from all over the world and how this day was very important for him. For the past few days, I had been pleasantly besieged. Besieged means surrounded by dignitaries and world leaders who were coming to pay their respects before the inauguration. So, 10th May is the day of his inauguration, and there are a lot of world leaders who have come to congratulate him and say thanks to him for ending something like apartheid in his country. The inauguration would be the largest gathering ever of international leaders on South African soil. So, this was one of the largest gatherings ever on the South African soil. The ceremonies took place in the lovely sandstone amphitheatre formed by the Union Buildings in Pretoria. Now, Pretoria is the administrative capital of South Africa. An amphitheatre means an open theatre. So, in an open theatre, the world leaders, the dignitaries sat to listen to Nelson Mandela being sworn in as the president. For decades, this had been the seat of white supremacy, and now it was the site of a rainbow gathering of different colors and nations for the installation of South Africa's first democratic, non racial government. So, Mandela says that this very place used to be the place where white people practiced apartheid, white people discriminated against the blacks, and this used to be the place of white supremacy, right? But now this has become the place where the first elected government will start, and I will be sworn in as the president of this country, right? On that lovely autumn day, I was accompanied by my daughter Zenani. So he was with his daughter Zenani. Accompanied means to be with, right? On the podium, Mr. de Klerk was first sworn in as the second deputy president. So Mr. de Klerk became the second deputy president. Then Thabo Mbeki was sworn in as the first deputy president. When it was my turn, I pledged to obey and uphold the constitution and to devote myself to the well-being of the republic and its people. So when Nelson Mandela was sworn in as the president, he took an oath to always work towards the well-being of his republic and his people. Now here is the excerpt from his speech. This is not his complete speech, but this is one part of his speech that is taken from his autobiography. Today, all of us do by our presence here confer glory and hope to newborn liberty. So he says all of us who are present here, we grant glory and hope. We hope that the liberty, the freedom that we have gained will always be there. out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster. What is the human disaster that he's talking about here? Apartheid. He says that it was such an extraordinary, not very common human disaster that lasted too long, that it went on for a very long time. Must be born a society of which all humanity will be proud. So he says that out of disaster will come something which is very positive, and there will be born a society out of this disaster, and all of humanity will be very proud of it. We who were the outlaws not so long ago have today been given the rare privilege to be host to the nations of the world on our own soil. He says we who were outlaws. And who are we? We are the black people, the mixed race people, who are non-white people, right? And he says that we were outlaws, but today we have been given the rare privilege, and we are hosting you all the world leaders here on our own soil, in our own country. We thank all of our distinguished international guests for having come to take possession with the people of a country of what is, after all, a common victory for justice, for peace, for human dignity. And he says that it is not only our victory, but we all as human beings have won a fight for justice, for peace, for human dignity. All of the world leaders who are present here have won in a significant way, right? We have at last achieved our political emancipation. Emancipation means freedom. So we have been politically freed. Before that, we were not allowed to be a part of the government. We were not allowed to do anything political, but now we are politically emancipated. We are freed. We pledge ourselves to liberate, to free all our people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation. Deprivation means when you don't get something, when you are deprived of something, suffering, gender, and other discrimination. So he says that we pledge that we will liberate ourselves, that we will free ourselves and our people from the continuing bondage, from all of these shackles, from bondages, from all of these locks of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender discrimination, and all of the other sorts of discrimination. We'll make sure that our people are free of all of these bondages, of all of these limitations. Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. Let freedom reign. God bless Africa. So he says that never again should it happen that some people should take over the other people and discriminate other people, and this shouldn't happen again on this beautiful land. Never again will we experience such an oppression. And he says, let freedom reign. God bless Africa. So this was the speech that Nelson Mandela gave on the day of his inauguration as the president. We will continue with the part 2 and 3 of this text in the next video, along with the analysis and conclusion. Keep watching. Thank you.